The girl with tired eyes. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only came long after midnight. A soft breeze rustled the curtains of the grand Los Angeles estate, and the glowing city lights outside spilled gently onto the marble floors. Keanu Reeves had just finished reading a script in his study upstairs. He rubbed his eyes, closed the cover, and stood up slowly, stretching his back. The air felt still, almost too still. He stepped into the hallway, intending to get a glass of water before bed. But as he passed the back staircase, he heard something odd. It wasn't the clatter of dishes or the hum of the refrigerator. It was the soft rustle of pages being turned, and the quiet tap-tap of a pencil against paper. Curious, Keanu descended the stairs without making a sound. The sound led him to the kitchen. He paused at the doorway. Under the soft yellow glow of a dim hanging lamp, a young woman sat at the far corner of the kitchen table. She had her back slightly hunched, one hand tangled in her dark curly hair, the other holding a pencil. A thick, tattered textbook lay open in front of her, its spine cracked and its margins filled with handwritten notes. Beside her, a worn notebook was filled with shaky but determined handwriting. The girl didn't see him. Keanu leaned against the wall, quietly observing. The girl looked no older than 20. He recognized her as Lina, the new maid the agency had sent just 3 weeks ago. She barely spoke unless spoken to, kept her head down and did her work with silent efficiency. She always seemed nervous, as if the world expected her to mess up at every turn. Now here she was, deep in a world of equations and definitions long after her shift had ended. After a few moments, he cleared his throat gently. Lina jumped. Her pencil dropped to the floor. She turned around in a panic, her eyes wide with fear. I'm sorry, sir, she stammered. I didn't mean to be here this late. I didn't know anyone was. I'll leave now. Keanu raised his hand gently to stop her. You don't have to leave, he said in a calm, warm voice. You're studying? Lina hesitated. Her eyes darted to the door, then to the textbook, then back to Keanu. Yes, sir. I have exams next week. I just clean in the mornings. And then I study when everyone's asleep. Keanu stepped closer and sat across from her. What are you studying? He asked. She blinked, unsure if this was a test or a trap. Basic accounting, she said softly. I want to be a bookkeeper. Maybe work in a small firm. Nothing fancy. Just enough to get my brother out of the shelter. Keanu looked at her, his expression unreadable. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't just a maid trying to pass time. This was a girl fighting for a future, one problem set at a time. Do you have someone helping you? He asked. She shook her head. No, sir. I just watch YouTube videos when I can. And sometimes I go to the library before work. They let me borrow this book. Keanu looked down at the textbook. It was clearly old, missing its cover with faded ink and curled edges. He could see some of the pages had been taped back together. How much sleep do you get? He asked. Not much, she admitted. 3 or 4 hours, but it's okay. I've been through worse. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back in the chair and watched her with a new kind of respect. Do you know who I am? He asked suddenly. Lina's face flushed. Yes, sir. Everyone knows you. Then why do you treat me like you're scared of me? She lowered her eyes. Because people like me don't usually last long in homes like this. One mistake and we're gone. I need this job. For the money. For my brother. I didn't want to get in trouble. Keanu was quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said, Pack your books. Lina looked up, confused. Am I being fired? No, he said with a small smile. You're coming with me. Her heart thudded in her chest. Now, she stared at him, then slowly gathered her book, notebook, and pencil. She followed him out to the garage, unsure if this was a dream, a joke, or something worse. He opened the door to his black SUV and motioned for her to get in. The streets were mostly empty, lit by the dull glow of street lamps. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, thoughtful. Lina clutched her textbook tightly, her mind racing with possibilities. They pulled up to a tall building made of glass and steel. The sign at the front read, "Open Minds Learning Center. This place doesn't open until 10. Lina whispered. "It opens now," Keanu said as he pulled out his phone. He made a call, spoke a few calm words, and then turned to her. "You're going to meet someone." They walked in together. An older woman in a blue sweater and glasses greeted them with a curious smile. "This is Lina," Keanu said. "She needs help, the kind you're best at." The woman looked at Lina, then at the textbook she clutched. "We can start tonight." Lina opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She didn't understand. Why was he doing this? Why would a world-famous actor take her to a private tutoring center in the middle of the night? As if reading her thoughts, Keanu knelt down to her level. "Someone once gave me a break when no one else would," he said. "I've never forgotten, and now it's my turn." Lina felt her throat tighten. She blinked quickly, trying not to cry. She had always believed life was unfair, that people like her were invisible, but now for the first time someone had not only seen her but believed in her. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu smiled gently. "No need to thank me. Just promise me you'll keep fighting, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." She nodded slowly, and the woman in the blue sweater led her inside. Keanu stayed in the lobby, watching through the glass as Lina sat at the tutoring desk. Her eyes were still tired, but something in them had changed. A small spark, a beginning. As he stepped back into the cool night air, Keanu didn't know that this single act of kindness would spark a chain of events far greater than anyone could imagine. But the real storm was still ahead because someone had been watching that night, and they didn't like what they saw. The letter under the rug the next morning arrived slowly, with the soft orange sun spilling through the east-facing windows of Keanu's home. He sat in the corner of the veranda, a cup of warm herbal tea in, his eyes focused on the distant hills. Something about the previous night kept echoing in his thoughts. The look in Lina's eyes, that mix of fear, hope, and disbelief, was something he hadn't seen in a long time. It stirred a quiet fire within him, the kind that didn't roar but smoldered with purpose. As the wind shifted, he rose and walked inside. The mansion was quiet again, the early morning stillness untouched. Passing through the hallway, he noticed something odd near the kitchen entrance. It was barely visible, a small corner of white sticking out from under the woven rug. He bent down and pulled it free. It was an envelope, unsealed, addressed simply, "To anyone who finds this." His brow furrowed as he opened it. The paper inside was creased, handled many times. It was written in Lina's careful, slightly shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, you probably work here or live here. Please don't be upset. I didn't take anything. I just wanted to clean and save money for my brother. His name is Rafi. He's only 10. He's at the Green Ridge shelter near Elm Street. I study at night, so maybe one day I can get a real job. But if I disappear, please make sure he's okay. Please." Keanu stood frozen, the letter trembling slightly in his fingers. It wasn't just a note. It was a whisper from someone who had accepted the possibility that she might one day vanish, unnoticed and forgotten. It shook him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was written so quietly, so matter-of-factly, with no expectation of rescue. Just a plea for a child. Later that day, he drove without hesitation to the Green Ridge shelter. The place was old, tucked between worn-down buildings, its sign rusted at the edges. He entered and was met by a woman with gray streaks in her bun, who looked both tired and kind. "I'm looking for a boy named Rafi," he said gently. The woman blinked, recognizing him instantly, but she didn't let it distract her. "Rafi, Lina's little brother?" Keanu nodded. "Sweet kid, smart, loves space documentaries. He's in the reading room. But why are you here?" Keanu paused, then said, "I read her letter." The woman smiled faintly and led him down a hallway, filled with faded posters and children's crayon drawings. In the last room, Seated on a beanbag with a picture book half open in his lap was Rafi. His face was thin but bright. He looked up as they entered. Keanu crouched next to him and asked softly, "Hey, you must be Rafi." The boy studied him for a second, then nodded. "Are you one of Lina's friends?" "I hope to be," Keanu said with a gentle smile. "She's studying hard for her exams." "Do you miss her?" Rafi's shoulders slumped slightly. "She's always tired. She tells me stories, though, when she gets time. She promised we'd have our own place one day, with books and a fish tank." Keanu nodded slowly. "She's keeping that promise, little man. She's working hard." After sitting with him for a while, Keanu made arrangements with the shelter. He quietly covered the next year's expenses for Rafi's care, tutoring, and meals. But he asked them not to tell Lina. Not yet. She needed to believe she was building the future herself. He would only be the silent bricks under her foundation. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Lina returned to the mansion from her shift at a local cafe. Her hands were rough, her apron still smudged with coffee stains. She didn't expect to see Keanu sitting at the kitchen island. She froze when she saw the envelope in his hand. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Under the rug," he replied calmly. "How long have you been carrying that fear, Lina?" She hesitated. "Since I was 14, when our mother left. Since the foster system split us. Since no one wanted a girl who read too much and cried at night." Keanu didn't interrupt. He waited. "I got Rafi back when I turned 18, she continued. "They let me be his guardian, but it's always been one step away from collapsing. One missed paycheck, one wrong word, and we're back in the system." He placed the letter gently on the counter. "Do you still want to be an accountant?" he asked. She looked down. "More than anything, but it takes years, and money, and time I don't always have." He leaned forward. "You don't know this yet," he said, "but sometimes life gives you an open door when you least expect it, and you're standing in front of one." He slid a small folder across the table. She opened it, hands trembling. It was a scholarship form, fully covered, into a certified accounting diploma program, complete with a stipend to cover housing and food during her study period. She gasped, covering her mouth. Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "Because you already did the hard part," he said quietly. "You believed in something when no one else did. Now it's my turn to believe in you." She stood there in stunned silence. The kind that shakes the heart more than any loud scream. The kind that comes when the world suddenly changes and you realize you're not alone anymore. She wanted to hug him, but didn't dare. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you," her voice catching on, the edge of emotion. But the peace of that moment didn't last long, because just 2 blocks away, in a dark corner of the cafe she worked at, someone had been watching her. A man in a gray jacket holding a phone. He had taken photos, and he had sent them to someone else with a single message. She's the one. And now she's connected to Reeves. Let's move. Eyes in the shadows. 3 days passed with a strange sense of calm that felt almost too still, like the silence before a storm. Lina had started attending the evening prep classes at the center Keanu had introduced her to. She woke up earlier now, finished her duties quicker, and left just before sunset, clutching her books and notes like they were shields against the world. Keanu had insisted she reduce her hours at the mansion, promising her the rest would be covered. She resisted at first, her pride still tethered to her sense of independence, but eventually she gave in, though only with a quiet promise to herself that she would repay him one day. What she didn't know was that Keanu wasn't keeping score. He didn't want her gratitude. He wanted her to rise. But while her world was shifting towards something brighter, something darker had begun watching her from the edges. On a foggy Thursday morning, a man named Victor Hale sat in a corner booth of a cheap diner near downtown. He wore a gray jacket, the kind that blended into city crowds and kept his face partially hidden behind a steaming cup of black coffee. His eyes, though calm on the surface, were cold and calculating beneath. Across from him sat a woman in a sharp black suit with a rigid smile and a folder thicker than it needed to be. She opened it and pushed it across the table. Her name is Lina Marcos, she said plainly. No criminal record. 2 part-time jobs. 1 dependent brother. All clean. But now, she's suddenly under the wing of Keanu Reeves. Strange, isn't it? Victor didn't answer. He just studied the photos inside the folder. Images of Lina entering Keanu's property, of the 2 of them at the learning center, and most recently, of Lina hugging her brother outside the Greenridge shelter. I don't trust coincidences, the woman continued. She's either bait or a pawn. Either way, I want to know everything. Find out who sent her, who's behind her, and why now. This comes from the top. Victor slid the folder back and stood. I'll get what you need. The woman raised an eyebrow. And what if she's just a maid trying to survive? Then, she's in the wrong house, Victor muttered as he walked out. Meanwhile, Lina had no idea her life was now under surveillance. She had just completed a particularly difficult mock exam. Her brain was foggy from numbers and formulas, and she clutched her notebook with a quiet pride. The teacher, a retired tax accountant named Mr. Yates, had patted her shoulder earlier and said, "You're getting sharper. Won't be long now." She had smiled, thanked him, and left the classroom with a lighter step. It was the first compliment on her intelligence that she had received in years. Outside, the wind had picked up. She tucked her notes under her arm and started walking down the sidewalk toward the bus stop. As she passed a small alley, she heard a noise. Quick footsteps behind her, then silence. She turned, heart racing, but no one was there. Just a man reading a newspaper at a bench and a woman feeding birds. She told herself she was being paranoid and kept walking. That night, back at the mansion, she arrived later than usual. Keanu was in the garage working on one of his custom bikes, oil-stained hands and soft music playing from an old speaker. He looked up as she entered. "How was class?" he asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Tough, but I think I passed the mock," she said, smiling faintly. "I even understood depreciation today," he chuckled. "That's more than most people manage." As she walked away, he noticed something else. Her shoulders were tense and she kept glancing out the windows. Later, as they passed each other near the hallway, he asked, "Something bothering you?" She hesitated. "Probably nothing. Just felt like someone was following me earlier." Keanu's face shifted slightly. Calm but sharper now. "Where?" he asked. "On Elm Street, near the learning center." He nodded slowly. "Do you want me to come with you tomorrow?" She smiled, but shook her head. "Thank you, but I think it was just my imagination." But Keanu wasn't so sure. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, he sat alone in his home office, a small laptop open in front of him. He didn't like coincidences either. He called a trusted friend from his stunt crew, someone who used to work private security, on sets and had a habit of noticing patterns in silence. "I need you to look into something," he said. "Quietly. A girl named Lina Marcos. She works for me. I think someone's watching her." The next day, Victor was back in the shadows, tailing Lina from a distance as she walked to class. But this time someone else was tailing him. Keanu's contact, Jasper, had a camera hidden in his jacket and a small earpiece that hummed as he whispered updates. Gray jacket, 6'2", military posture. He's watching her all right. But he's watching everyone too. Not your usual creep. Keanu listened silently from his phone as he sat in the back of a production meeting across town. He excused himself halfway through, claiming a migraine, and walked out into the daylight with a different kind of energy. That evening, as Lina exited her class, Jasper was the first to approach her. "Don't be scared," he said calmly, showing her a tiny badge. "Keanu asked me to walk you to the stop. He's just being cautious." Lina hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her instincts told her this man was different from whoever had made her skin crawl the night before. Meanwhile, Victor watched from a distance as Jasper walked beside her. He narrowed his eyes, then turned away, pulling out his phone. "Change of plans," he muttered into the receiver. "She's being protected. Tell the boss we need to escalate." But the worst twist was still to come. That night, Lina arrived home to find her small locker room inside the mansion in disarray. Her books were scattered, her drawers pulled out, and her notebook, the one with her private calculations, study notes, and dreams, was missing. She dropped to her knees, panic flooding her chest. She reached under the mattress where she had hidden a photo of her and Rafi gone. Someone had been in her room, not to steal but to learn about her. Just then the door creaked open and Keanu stood there, holding a small object in his hand. It was her notebook. "I found it in the bushes by the security fence," he said, voice low. "Someone's getting too close." Lina's hands trembled as she took it from him. "Why would anyone do this?" she whispered. Keanu looked at her with a calm that masked the storm rising inside him. "Because someone thinks you matter," he said, "and that scares them." As the night grew heavier and the mansion slipped into silence again, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about a girl trying to pass her exams. This was bigger, and someone out there wanted to stop her before she got any further. Whispers from the wire. The next morning arrived wrapped in a thick haze that clung to the windows like a warning. Everything in the house felt still but tense, like the silence before a violin string snaps. Lina stood at the sink in the guest kitchen, slowly washing her hands, though they were already clean. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. She hadn't slept properly since she found her room ransacked. She hadn't told Rafi. She didn't want to scare him. She didn't even tell the learning center. All she had now was that notebook, the one Keanu had recovered, and the constant feeling that someone was still watching. Keanu entered without a sound, walking softly across the marble floor. He stopped beside her, holding out a warm ceramic cup. "Chamomile," he said. "Might help." Lina gave a weak smile as she took it. "Thank you." He sat across from her, elbows resting on the counter, his voice low and steady. "I had the security system checked last night. There were signs someone slipped through the fence line, probably during the afternoon. It wasn't a random break-in. They knew what to look for." "But why me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "I have nothing. I'm just a housemaid trying to pass an exam." Keanu leaned forward. "You're not nothing. Someone sees you as a threat, and that makes you important." She looked at him, eyes filled with questions she couldn't ask. Instead, she nodded, slowly clutching the cup in both hands. For the first time in her life, someone was protecting her without expecting anything in return. But that kindness made the fear sharper, because now if something happened to her, it wouldn't just be her who lost. Later that day, Jasper returned to the estate. He came through the back entrance, avoiding cameras, dressed in plain jeans and a hoodie. He carried a small black case under his arm. Keanu led him to the den where they spoke in low tones. "It's deeper than we thought," Jasper said, unfolding a laptop and plugging in a drive. The man following her, Victor Hale, used to work for a private intelligence firm, not some amateur. This guy was involved in data recovery, surveillance, even political blackmail. He went off the radar 3 years ago. Now he's working under a name connected to an old shell company, Solmira Technologies. Keanu narrowed his eyes. "Solmira?" Jasper nodded. "And guess who one of the past investors was?" "Arthur Kane," Keanu said, without hesitation. Jasper smiled. "You always were good at connecting the dots." Arthur Kane was a billionaire, media tycoon with a long history of influencing elections, covering scandals, and using intimidation to bury stories. Years ago, Keanu had walked away from a high-paying film under Kane's studio because of unethical behavior he'd witnessed. The media had spun it quietly, but Kane hadn't forgotten, and now it seemed he had resurfaced. "So this is about me," Keanu muttered. "Maybe," Jasper replied. "But more likely, it's about both of you. Lina's being used, or tested, and you're the target with the bigger spotlight." Keanu stood and walked to the window. The garden outside looked peaceful, but his reflection in the glass showed a different truth. Someone had invaded his life, not through force, but through shadows. They had chosen a girl he cared about. A girl too kind and too quiet to fight. "Back, we need to flip this," he said. "They're playing games in the dark, let's bring some light." Meanwhile, Lina had just left her class and was walking down the block toward the bus stop. She passed a flower stall and paused. The tulips reminded her of a drawing Rafi had made. A house with yellow flowers in the window. She bought a single, using the last spare coin in her coat pocket. A simple gift. A promise to him. As she reached the corner, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The windows were tinted. The back door opened just slightly. "Miss Marcos," a voice called. "Can we have a word?" She froze. The tulip shook in her hand. A man stepped out. Tall, sharp suit, clean shoes. Not a threat by posture, but something about him felt wrong. The way he smiled too neatly. The way his eyes didn't blink enough. "Don't know you," she said quickly, stepping back. "No, but we know you," he said. "And we know you've been spending a lot of time with Mr. Reeves. He's a generous man, isn't he? Always helping people. Must be nice." She clutched her book tighter and turned away. "I'm late for the bus." "One moment," he said, stepping forward. "We're just curious. What do you know about his financial records or his private meetings? You work in his house. You must see things." She turned sharply. "I clean floors and fold towels, that's it." "Sure," he said with a shrug. "But sometimes people leave things lying around. Emails, schedules. Just keep your eyes open. Maybe there's something worth sharing." "I won't spy for you," she said, voice rising. His face didn't change. "It's not spying, it's opportunity. And you could use a better life, couldn't you? Don't waste the chance." The door opened wider. "Think about it." And with that, he stepped back in and the car pulled away, leaving a thin trail of smoke in its wake. When Lina got home that night, she didn't speak. Not to Rafi, not to Keanu. She just sat at the edge of her small bed staring at the tulip, in a plastic cup beside her. The flower that was supposed to be a promise now felt like a warning. Later, she went to Keanu and handed him her notebook again. "I think they want me to steal from you." Keanu looked at her, eyebrows tightening. She explained everything, the car, the man, the question. Every word spilled from her like broken glass. But she didn't cry. Not this time. When she finished, Keanu said only this: "We're not going to run from this, we're going to stand together." The next day, a plan began. Keanu contacted a trusted investigative journalist he once worked with on a documentary about displaced children. Her name was Mel Carter, a fierce woman who didn't fear powerful enemies. She came to the estate that night and they shared everything. Victor Hale, Solmira, the fake job offer, the planted fear. Mel's eyes gleamed with purpose. "They're using her as bait, Keanu, but if they want a story, let's give them one." "A story?" Lina asked, confused. Mel turned to her with a confident smile. "Yes, your story. The truth. Not what they expect." But before they could move, one more card was played. 2 nights later, Rafi disappeared from the shelter. No note, no call, no witnesses, just an empty bed and a message left on Keanu's front gate. "Back off, or the boy doesn't come back." The storm beneath silence, the night Rafi disappeared. A cold wind swept through Los Angeles like a curse. It wasn't just the weather. Something darker had begun to settle over everything. A chill that no heater or blanket could chase away. Inside Keanu's mansion, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, heavy, suffocating. Lina sat on the floor in his private library, her back against the wall, her knees clutched tightly to her chest. She hadn't said a word in hours. Not since they got the message. Not since the shelter director, with shaking hands, showed them the security footage of a man dressed as a delivery driver walking Rafi out the back door. The footage cut off just before the license plate came into frame. It had been deliberate, well executed, clean. Keanu paced across the room with quiet fury. Every step echoed like thunder. Jasper was on the phone in the corner, rattling off coordinates and timestamps, his voice low and fast. Mel Carter stood nearby, scanning printed documents with a red pen, circling names and making frantic connections. Even the dogs, usually calm and happy, were tense, pacing the halls, ears twitching, sensing something was wrong. Lina finally broke the silence. Her voice was raw, almost broken. This is my fault. Keanu stopped pacing. No. Yes. It is, she said, louder now. I should have told you earlier. About the men. About the car. About the shelter. I should have. He stepped forward and knelt in front of her, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. Lina, listen to me. The only thing you did was survive. You protected your brother. You studied at night. You fought harder than anyone. I know, this is not your fault, this is theirs, and now they've crossed a line they can't come back from. Jasper hung up and joined them. I found something, he said, holding up a printout. The van that took Rafi was stolen last week. It was reported abandoned this morning. But get this. It was found with a new GPS device inside. They wanted us to find it. Keanu frowned. A trap? Maybe. Or maybe they want us to come looking. Mel stepped forward. They want a public reaction, they want you in the media. They want her scared and you exposed. If you make one wrong move, they'll twist it all. Keanu looked at Lina. But we're not going to play by their rules. She wiped her face, nodded slowly. What do we do? Keanu stood. We give them what they want, but on our terms. Jasper leaned in. We stage a press event. Say we're opening a new youth foundation, draw attention. They'll try to interfere, and we'll be waiting. Mel nodded. And while the world watches you, we'll be searching the shadows for Rafi. For the next 24 hours, the estate transformed into a command center. Jasper brought in a small private team, former military, now loyal only to those who earned it. Mel's investigative unit worked through every connection between Solmira Technologies and Arthur Kane's network. They traced offshore accounts, shell charities, ghost companies, all designed to keep truth buried. But the deeper they dug, the more they found. And each thread led back to one place, a private compound in the desert. Off the grid, not listed, not mapped. That night, as the fake press event kicked off, Keanu, standing in front of dozens of cameras talking about children's education, purposefully vague. Lina sat backstage pretending to be calm. But inside, her heart was a battlefield. Every second that passed without news of Rafi felt like a new cut. But she remembered Keanu's words. We stand together. And she held on to them like a rope in a flood. Meanwhile, 50 miles east, Jasper and Mel's team surrounded the compound. It was hidden behind layers of fencing and brush, camouflaged like a forgotten ruin. But it wasn't abandoned. There were guards, heat signatures, vehicles. And inside one of the side buildings, a thermal scan picked up a small form, curled up on a cot. Unmoving. Jasper's voice came through Keanu's earpiece. We've got him, but we'll need a distraction to pull him out. Keanu didn't hesitate. In the middle of the press event, he paused, looked directly into the camera, and said, There are people in this city who would rather silence children than lift them up. Today I make a promise, not just to the kids, but to those who think fear wins. You're wrong. And then he walked off the stage, took off the microphone, and got into the black Jeep already waiting outside. Drive, he said. Jasper's team moved under cover of dusk, disabling the perimeter alarms one by one. Keanu arrived 20 minutes later. They had no time for careful planning. They had to go now. Every minute wasted could mean Rafi being moved. Or worse. Mel took the back route with 2 agents, cutting through the electrical grid. Jasper led point. Keanu followed with a tactical vest, heart pounding, not from fear, but fury. Inside the building, Rafi stirred. He heard voices. Boots. A door clicked. For a moment, he thought it was just another shift change. But then a light flicked on and someone knelt beside him. Rafi, Jasper whispered. We're here to take you home. The boy blinked. Where's Lina? Safe. And waiting. Jasper scooped him up and rushed back through the hall. Alarms started blaring. Someone had noticed. Outside, a black truck screeched across the gravel road, blocking their escape. Armed guards spilled out, shouting. But before they could fire, Keanu stepped into the open, hands raised. You want someone important? He called out. I'm right here. All weapons turned to him. Jasper took the chance and bolted left, cutting through the dust cloud, disappearing behind a shed with Raffi held tight. Mel's team fired warning shots in the air, creating enough chaos to draw attention away from their real exit. One by one, they slipped through the broken fencing into the brush to the waiting van. Keanu kept walking toward the men, his voice calm. "You're not going to shoot me. You know why? Because then the whole world will know who you work for." One of the guards hesitated. His finger hovered on the trigger. He looked unsure. Keanu stepped closer. "Go ahead. Make me a martyr. But when this footage hits the news, when they trace this location back to Kane, he's finished. And you're just another piece sacrificed for a king who never cared." No one fired. Sirens echoed in the distance. Someone had triggered the emergency signal. Police and press were inbound. The men turned and fled. By the time the authorities arrived, the place was empty. Keanu was already in the van, holding Raffi's hand. Back at the estate, Lina stood at the gate watching the headlights approach. She didn't breathe until the door opened and Raffi ran to her, burying his face in her stomach. She dropped to her knees, hugging him tightly, sobbing without sound. Keanu stood nearby, letting them have their moment, his eyes full of quiet, rage and quiet relief. Mel walked up beside him. "We have what we need," she said. "Documents, recordings, everything, it's time to expose them." But Keanu looked away. "No, not yet." Mel blinked. "What do you mean?" "They took a child. They used fear. That's not something you expose with headlines. That's something you finish." Mel frowned. "You're not thinking about revenge, are you?" "Not revenge," Keanu said. "Justice." And in the distance, far beyond the gates of peace, Arthur Kane watched the news coverage on a tablet screen. He smiled faintly, his hand tightening around a crystal tumbler of expensive scotch. "Interesting," he whispered to himself. "The girl matters more than we thought." The echo that changed everything. Dawn broke like a slow-burning fire across the sky, casting golden light over the hills above Los Angeles. Inside the Reeves estate, the atmosphere had shifted, tense, yet strangely focused. Raffi slept safely now, tucked into a soft bed in the guest wing, unaware of just how close the world had come to losing him. Keanu stood on the back terrace overlooking the city, the faint hum of helicopters in the distance, birds starting to sing again like nothing had happened. But something had changed. Not just in him, not just in Lina. In all of them, inside the library, Mel Carter sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by hard drives, USB sticks, and old paper records. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her mind burned bright. She had finally mapped out the connection. Solmira Technologies was just one name in a nest of shell corporations tied back to Kane's network, a digital maze built to protect secrets, launder money, and destroy reputations. And at the heart of it, archived deep inside a wiped server, was something else. Audio recordings, confidential investor meetings, and one file marked Initiation Lina Marcos.mp4. Keanu entered, his voice low. "You found something." Mel looked up, her expression heavy. They didn't just stumble upon her, they chose her. She played the file. A blurry video flickered onto the screen. It was an office, white walls, a long desk. Seated were three, and one of them, Arthur Kane. In the center was a digital profile projected on a screen. Lina's photo, her foster history, her test scores, her employment history, everything. Kane's voice was clear, sharp. "She fits the model, low risk, emotionally isolated, financially strained. The kind that won't fight back, get someone to place her." Keanu's jaw tensed as the reality sank in. Lina hadn't just been watched. She had been targeted, planted, set up to be close to him. But they had never expected she would fight, that she would refuse to break, that she would earn not pity, but respect. "They used her like a chess piece," Mel whispered, "and they thought you'd toss her away when it got messy." Keanu didn't say a word. He simply reached down, picked up the flash drive and said, "Get the press ready." Meanwhile, Lina stood in the garden with Rafi, gently guiding his hands through the petals of a small flower bed. She'd started teaching him about plants and colors again, like they used to before things fell apart. But her mind wasn't present. She knew something was coming. She could feel it in the way Keanu avoided her gaze, in the whispers between Jasper and Mel. She hadn't asked yet. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Later that afternoon, Keanu gathered everyone in the media room. The walls were lined with screens. Mel dimmed the lights and turned to Lina. "Before you see this, you need to understand. You didn't do anything wrong. They used you, but you turned it into something powerful." Lina nodded slowly. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder. And then the file played. She watched herself described like a tool, a number, a type. Her foster records dissected, her trauma measured like a data point. And when the video ended, she didn't speak. Not at first. Finally, she said, "They think kindness is weakness." Keanu nodded. They made one mistake. They assumed we wouldn't fight back. The next day, the entire story was released, not to the tabloids, not through gossip sites, but through a respected international journalism collective that Keanu and Mel had worked with before. It was titled, "The Pawn Who Became a Queen: How a Maid Outwitted a Billionaire's Game." The article exploded across the internet. The video file of Kane's planning meeting went viral within hours. People around the world were outraged, not just because of the manipulation, but because it revealed how many others had been used just like Lina. Whistleblowers began to speak. Journalists opened old cases. Investigators reopened frozen files. And amid the storm, Lina stood before a crowd of students at the learning center where it had all started. She wasn't a maid anymore. She wasn't even a student. She had just been offered a full scholarship to a university accounting program, and she had something to say. "I used to believe the world didn't see people like me," she said. "But now I know. The world sees what we show it. So show it strength. Show it kindness. And don't ever let them tell you your pain makes you weak. It makes you human." The audience stood and clapped, some with tears in their eyes. Outside, Mel walked beside Keanu as they watched from a distance. "She's going to change people," Mel said. Keanu nodded. "She already has." In the weeks that followed, Kane's empire unraveled. Investors fled. Politicians distanced themselves. Arrests were made. And Victor Hale, the man who had followed Lina in the shadows, vanished before he could be caught. But not before leaving a final message in a corrupted file, found in one of his burner devices. She was never supposed to survive, and yet, she's the one thing we couldn't break. We built the machine, but the crack came from a girl with a notebook. Months later, Lina opened her first consulting firm, a small office above a bookstore. She kept the old notebook in a frame by her desk, and on the first page, in shaky handwriting, she had written a sentence from the night it all began. "Keep fighting, even when it hurts." Rafi was thriving too, placed in a top school, already winning science awards. He still kept a drawing of tulips in his backpack, one he had made while waiting for Lina to come home. As for Keanu, he never spoke publicly about the story. When asked in interviews, he would only smile and say, "Sometimes you don't need to be the main character. Sometimes you just help turn the page." But in his quiet moments when he walked the garden paths alone or sat under the stars on his veranda, he thought about that night. The girl with tired eyes, the quiet table, the future that almost never was. And he knew, deep in his soul, that this was the real story, not fame, not headlines, but a girl who refused to stay invisible, and a world that finally had to see her.